Welcome back to the Rally Report podcast. It's the annual Stuart Crawford episode, guys, and always thankful for him to jump on as he's a busy man with other podcasts he does as well with CrossCourt Analytics. Quick shout out to them. And also Squash Radio, the latest episode, which was hilarious. But I'm glad he carved out some time for me for this one as well. But, he's here today to do a bit of a CSA recap, season recap, and also, he comes back with a different perspective as a national champion coach now. But we want to just also talk about some PSA stuff as well. But welcome back, Stu, and congratulations.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks for having me back. I've missed doing these, so it should be fun to catch up and dissect a pretty eventful college squash season, certainly from our end, and then also some other topics of discussion.
Awesome. Well, we'll go right into it. I just curious to hear how life has changed since winning the national championship. Any recruitment for head coach jobs elsewhere? Are you sticking with Penn? Have you been approached? I'm really curious about this. With how much of a celebrity you're becoming?
Unfortunately, I'm pretty committed to Penn for the time being. I obviously had a great season, and don't want to rule anything out, but yeah, I'm certainly happy where I am and having a lot of fun doing it. So yeah, and I think hopefully there's an opportunity for us to repeat next year, given that we don't graduate a single player. So I know the Yale guys, and I think we're thinking guys like Nick and Dana were graduating, but actually they're both coming back for a fifth year. So we'll have the same team plus a few incoming freshmen on top of it.
Have the freshmen also been confirmed right now? Do you know? Can that go
forward? Zain Patel and Rustin Weiser on the boys' side from the US, and a young Egyptian boy called Marwan Tamer. So that should be a pretty strong class. And then on the girls' side, we have two international girls, one from Hong Kong, one from South Africa, and then an American girl, Ali Stoddard.
I was worried. I was concerned there. I thought for the young Egyptian, I thought you were going to say Zachariah for a sec. So got me free. I don't know if the recruitment process has already begun for him, but
well, yeah, he's the year behind that. So he wouldn't be starting in the fall.
I see. I'm sure every coach out there is really hoping he might join the CSA scene, but I don't know what the regulations look like on that end. But we'll keep it hush hush for now. But sorry, before we get into the nationals, actually, that weekend, I wanted to kind of set the scene up before that weekend, and I want to dig in about how the season went before that nationals and how you felt, how confident you guys were. And I know that it wasn't all smooth sailing, so could you give us a little bit of recap on that end?
Yeah, the season overall went fairly well. We were undefeated until essentially our last two matches of the season, or the regular season. We had a pretty straightforward run, and then our first real test, I think, came against Harvard the last weekend of January. We played them at home, which, with hindsight, was a big advantage. But we managed to win that 7-2, which was a really positive result. We kind of sensed that Harvard weren't at the level that it'd been previously, but even still, it still felt like a big win. And then the following week we went up to Yale. We managed to get a win against Yale away. And then the following day we went up to Trinity, who at that point were undefeated as well. I think at that point we were the only two undefeated teams. And we narrowly lost 5-4 on their courts. And then the final week of the regular season we went up to Princeton, and again we lost a really tight 5-4 match. So yeah, we were fairly happy with the season. We shared the Ivy League title with Princeton. We would have won it outright if we'd beaten them, but their win against us meant that we ended up sharing it because they had lost to Yale previously. So yeah, it was good.
Is that a thing that has happened before, sharing an Ivy title, or is this? I had no idea. I thought something got overturned, and which is why I went to Penn, and I realized later that it was a shared title. But has this happened before? Do you know?
Yeah, it definitely has. It certainly happened in other sports. It's happened in squash. It's quite unusual for it to be a two-way share. quite often you get a three-way share, because usually what happens is one team beats Team A, for example, beats Team B beats Team C, and then Team C beats Team A, which is kind of what happened with us, Princeton and Yale, except Yale also lost to Harvard. So Harvard and Yale had 2 losses, and us and Princeton had 1 loss each. So that's why it ended up being a tie between just us and Princeton, even though Princeton's loss came to Yale. Yale had lost to us and Harvard, which ruled them out.
I mean, as a spectator, it was fascinating to see how this season was panning out. I actually had no idea what was going to happen with the seedings and stuff going into nationals. I think it was the first time since I've been following along where it didn't seem clear. But I wanted to kind of jump into the Princeton match, because I know that was a bit of a controversy at the end, and it was annoying because there seemed to be a lot of chit chat, but the audio was off on the live stream on that specific court 1, or their main court. And I was hoping if any detail you could have shared with the audience that you can, that made it so feisty.
Yeah, I mean, just us and Princeton's a big rivalry. I think the matches between all these top schools, I mean, right from the start of the season, we recognised that it was going to be relatively open. There was probably going to be 5 teams, all very evenly matched. We did have a sense that Trinity was probably the hardest team to beat, especially the way they matched up with us, just because they had so much strength at the top, which I think in normal circumstances, our top was also our strength, but they were the only team that we felt like could match up against us there. But yeah, going into that Princeton match, so one of the things that was quite interesting, if you look at there was 10 matches between those big 5, and they were basically always won by the home team. There was only one match won by the away team, which was us beating Yale up at Yale. And Trinity were a little bit fortunate in that I don't know how this happened, but they got to play us, Princeton, Harvard and Yale all at home, which is a little bit crazy. And Trinity is a hard place to play. I mean, their courts are pretty tricky to get used to. The glass courts are really fast up there. Even the side courts can be a little bit tough sometimes. So we definitely felt like there was a chance there to overturn that at a neutral site. But going back to the Princeton match, I mean, we knew Princeton was going to be a threat. They were having a really good season, just like we were. Again, playing them away from home. When we played them 2 years ago, we were playing for the Ivy title, and we had a really, really tough match that we narrowly won 5-4. But we were ready for that to be tight all the way down the lineup. They're a team that's got really good depth. I mean, I think I saw this a couple of days ago, but there was only 2 players in all of college squash that were undefeated this season. One was obviously Veer, who played number 1 for Cornell, won every match, and then went and won the individuals. The only other player who was undefeated and was playing all the big matches against the best teams was Gordon Lamb, who's the Princeton number 9. So I think that's an indication of the fact that they're also a team that has got 9 or 10 really solid players and are tough to beat down in those lower positions. So yeah, it sort of played out. I mean, we took an early lead. Princeton plays a 5-court system as opposed to most other schools that play a 3-court system. So, we actually won the first shift of matches. So there was 4 matches, and then, the second shift 5. We didn't actually go 4-love up just because the number 2 match between Omar and Hollis Robertson, I think it was about an hour and a half. So I think number 7 and 8 had both played their matches before that one match played. But basically we won all 4 of the first shift of matches that started first. We went 3-love up, and then, they got 1 in the second shift, and then Omar put us 4-1 up. But even then we didn't feel completely safe because we knew the matches still to come were going to be really tight. So, yeah, that's how it played out.
Yeah. Did something happen during the match, during these matches that caused a problem then, or did it just like it ended and you guys just exited the Princeton?
No, there was definitely some tension. I mean, every team has players on their team that are very, very fair, and I think we're no different. But I did feel like I think there's two players on their team in particular. Well, definitely one, and even the second one is a little bit sort of dubious in the way he conducts himself. But I also understand, like, you're playing a big match for your team at 4-all, like, you're not going to be like calling all your double bounces and like not taking opportunities. Like, I get it. It's college squash. My frustration was more with some of the refereeing, which I thought, so I'm speaking specifically about the match between the number 4s, which was Nathan Cooey for Penn and Ahmed Weil, or Shika, if you know him, for Princeton.
Yeah.
And then also the number 1 match. I felt like
I did get to see the one match. There's a lot of, as Stuart always says, the dark arts. Yeah, was definitely in play.
And again, I don't really blame the players. I think the referees have a responsibility to be aware of that and to deal with it. And in both those matches, I don't feel like the refereeing was up to par of what you would expect for that level of play.
Is it usually for these type of matches? I'm aware that it's usually done by actual refs. They don't do the teammates anymore. That does it, but it still doesn't seem to solve the problem.
It's up to the home team to decide on that. So we try and get refs in for our big matches. Anytime we play those teams that we think we're going to be close with, we try and get professional refs in, because it's fairer, but also because it just allows the players to focus on their prep for their matches. But like when we played Trinity had one ref for the whole facility, and didn't really referee any matches, just sort of monitored what was going on in each court, and to be honest, didn't really do much, if I'm honest. But Princeton did have refs. I'm not sure if they had refs on every court, but certainly those two courts, or those two matches that I'm referencing, they both had professional refs that, like I say, were not, in my mind, up to standard.
So I wanted to move on with now, after those great season, and then towards the end you get those tough losses, but going to nationals, there's been a quick switch of lineup with Nick Spizzirri playing 3 throughout the entire season, and then freshman Solomon playing 1, and there was like a flipperoo there. But I know that wasn't met with some complications there. I'm sure other teams were keeping an eye on the lineup, and I think they had submitted a complaint about it. But yeah, if you guys run us through that one as well, because I know that was a topic of chatter behind the scenes for sure about that switch up. But yeah,
I'm sure. Yeah, I mean, from our end, we just looked at how the matches have played out. Salman didn't play any challenge matches in the first semester because I don't know if people are aware of this, but he fell off one of these like scooters that a lot of the kids in college campuses are using these days, and he actually fractured his wrist.
Oh wow!
So he was out for about 6 weeks. He missed all the challenge matches and didn't play Ivy scrimmage or any of the matches. He came back, started training again sort of December time, and managed to get like a full month of training in before we resumed in January. But yeah, his first 2 challenge matches, we had him play Omar and Nick. He beat Omar in 5, and he beat Nick in 3.
Was that a shock to you personally, or were you expecting him as freshman?
It was a shock that he beat Nick in 3. I kind of sensed that they were all very close, and it didn't really surprise me. I mean, yeah, we'll talk about Nick in a second, but it wasn't a surprise that Salman was playing number 1. It was only really a shock that he beat Nick so comprehensively. So then Nick was at 3, which he was fine with. I mean, for someone that's such a competitor, Nick is also one of the best teammates out there. Like, he just goes and put in whatever number, he just goes out and tries to win his match. But Salman struggled a little bit playing 1. I mean, his first ever match in college squash happened to be against Cornell when he played beer.
It's quite the introduction.
Exactly. And then he had a few wins. He had a really good win against CEL, who he beat 3-love quite comfortably. He beat Costales in 5 in the Harvard match. But then he lost to Sharaf, which, again, no disgrace. Sharaf's reigning, or at that time was reigning individual champion, and just made the final again last week. But then he lost to El Barbary, who Nick had played El Barbary 3 times in the last couple of years. once in the regular season last year and a couple of times at the Ivy scrimmage, and he had won all 3 of those matches. So we did.
Yeah, I
sort
think
of
that's where
feel
the
like maybe,
complaint came from. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, we don't get details of who complained. We submit our lineup, and it's due on the Monday before the event. You submit it. So we didn't actually play challenge matches. We felt like there was a strong enough case to be made for Nick to play one based on his record for the team, the fact that he was basically unbeaten at number 2 last year. I was going to say he was unbeaten at number 1 this year, but he actually lost to F&M, unbelievably. Yeah. But he hadn't lost any of the big matches. And just his composure, like he's so much more experienced than Salman in those big matches. So yeah.
Wait, before you go more into it, I'm curious, when you guys make that decision internally as a team, is there any was that smooth sailing internally, or was there some fight back? I mean, I'm sure these players, I think it's tough. I'm sure they come with big egos as well, with such successful junior careers, and I'm sure it's not easy for them to accept the fact that there's going to be these type of switches. But how do you manage that internally?
So Gilly and I were just sort of discussing our lineup for nationals and whether there was any value in changing that. We discussed it initially with the captains. Nick is one of the captains, so he was part of that discussion. He was confident that he could win at number 1. He was happy to take that responsibility on, because that's the thing. Like, everyone wants to play number 1, but you also then are expected to perform. As we're not a team that's going to stick someone at number 1 just to sort of stack and hold everyone down. So I think at that point we agreed that made sense. So then we then met with Omar and Salman, who were the 2 players that were going to be affected, and Nick, and the 3 of them just sat and discussed it, and they were on board with it. So yeah, we submitted the team. There was obviously an appeal. We submitted a justification to the CSA. They reviewed that justification and were satisfied that there was enough of a case to put Nick up to number 1, given his record, given the fact that he's consistently performed. I mean, he's been one of our best performers for 2 years now.
Yeah, big time player. Always manages to get the wins. It's pretty insane to think about. But yeah, I mean, now we're kind of setting the scene. The scene has been set. I'm curious if you could give us now the play-by-play of the weekend. What was going through your mind? And I know that, I mean, it was a crazy weekend with the initial scare with Trinity. I'm sure you guys were monitoring that as well against Drexel, and then the rematch that was building up with Princeton. And I'm sure there was some fired up players there for that one. But yeah, what was your take on that weekend?
Well, we had a good week of training. We never really go over to the Spectre Centre, but that week we went over there 3 times. We practiced at the Spectre Centre Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, so we felt good on those courts. And then the event actually started on the Thursday because there was that extra round this year, but because we were a top 4 seed, we didn't have to play. So then we played Columbia, which we were obviously fairly confident, but we also recognised that one of the things about nationals that's different from the rest of the season is it's the only time you really play 3 back-to-back matches against really top teams. And one of the trends I've witnessed in the sort of 7 or 8 years I've been involved in college squash is that the team that ends up winning the national championship rarely wastes a lot of energy on that first day. They're usually pretty efficient. They get through the match quickly. So our big message to the boys was, let's just go and take care of business as quick as we can. I thought we actually performed really, really well against Columbia. Sometimes those matches can be a little bit tricky because the other team has nothing to lose. They're sort of fired up for it. There's a lot of pressure on our guys, but I thought they dealt with that really, really well. So yeah, we were the first match in the quarterfinals to actually finish. All the matches started at the same time. We were the first one to wrap up our match, which was a good sign. And then we're sort of following this Drexel Trinity match and thinking, wow, did not see this coming. Because they hadn't played regular season. I think they were actually supposed to play the week before that, and then the match got cancelled for some reason. So they hadn't actually played, but I'll be honest, I did not see that one coming.
I don't think anyone did, yeah.
I was pleasantly surprised even when they got through, it was like, okay, well, maybe they're not as solid as they've been all year. Maybe there is a chance. I mean, I think Columbia had taken them to 5-4 early in the season, so I kind of knew that they were vulnerable. But that obviously gives another chance. But really our big focus all weekend was on trying to get to the final. We knew that we were going to play Princeton in the semis, who we'd lost to. We knew that there was a chance to overturn that, but it was not going to be easy. We had to reverse some big matches. And yeah, we were able to get it done in the semis.
Were you confident going into that match, being like, well, I'm aware that we lost previously, but you knew your team would be able to win? There's not a lack of confidence on that end.
Yeah, I mean, I always trust our guys. I mean, we're at a level now where I think we can beat any team in college squash when we perform well. It's really hard to get 9 guys to perform well on the same day. I was actually chatting to Jack about this. It's like, just statistically, you're probably only going to play your best squash maybe at most, I would say 3 or 4 times in a season. So let's say that you play sort of 16 matches throughout a year in college squash, and generously you perform at your best 4 of those 16 matches. That's 25% of the time you're producing your best squash. Now you extrapolate that out to having 9 guys in your team, and you're trying to get all 9 of them to have, you basically got a 25% chance of one guy playing his best squash. And now you're trying to get 9 guys to play their best squash on the same day. Like, the odds of that happening are very, very low. But it was a match that I knew that if we perform well, we could win. There was a couple of matches we had lost in the regular season match that I thought we could overturn. Specifically, the number 4 match between Nathan and Shika. I thought Varun Chaudhuri, who had basically been unbeaten all year, apart from that Princeton regular season match against Avi Agarwal, I thought he could reverse that. And actually we did. But what we didn't account for was we also lost the number 5 and 7 matches that we'd won. So we ended up splitting the number 4, 5, 6, 7 match, and all 4 of them were the exact same matchups, same 2 players playing. And the 2 matches we won in the regular season, we lost, and the 2 matches we lost regular season, we won at nationals.
That's a crazy flip, but wow. And then going to the final, I mean, on paper, it seemed pretty decisive of a win. And I guess it makes sense to your theory earlier about whoever has the most smooth sailing, efficient way to the road to the final usually gets the better of the final result. So I guess you're right on about it. But on paper, it seemed a lot very decisive of a scoreline.
Yeah, it didn't feel that decisive. I mean, I think the first shift was 1, 4, and 7, I think. So I was coaching Nick against Sharaf, which he obviously lost. But at the same time, I think we were up in the other 2 matches. We might have won one, and the other one was close to being over. So there was a good chance we were still going to come out of that first shift 2-1 up. And Nick was obviously really disappointed. But like I say, Nick is the ultimate team player. He's won so many big matches, and unfortunately the team has not come through. And I said to him after the match, I was like, look, you've carried this team for basically 2 years. I think I said it's about fucking time that they carried you.
It's very fair. I mean, given the results he's had, especially in the finals in previous years. But yeah, I mean, also, wait, quick side note, I'm curious what type of tactics you do, especially against Mohammad Sharaf, who seems to love that glass court in the Spectre Center. I mean, given that he came off that individual win as well, but I mean, when he's on, he seems hard to break down.
Yeah. I was trying to encourage Nick to stay relatively patient. We targeted the backhand side a little bit more. I think in hindsight that might have been a slight mistake, just because he's not as dangerous on the backhand side, but he's probably steadier. Like, he doesn't make as many. The forehand's just a risk. He's going to hit more winners in the forehand, but he's probably also going to make more errors. So it's a case of whether you target that side, trying to squeeze the arrows out, but also knowing that there's a risk that he can just hit some outrageous straight and cross-court nicks. He's so explosive across the middle of the court that getting the ball over from that backhand side onto the forehand side is always dangerous, because he reads it and just jumps on the volley so well. So Nick was essentially trying to squeeze him down the backhand side. I didn't feel like it necessarily worked as well as I was hoping. And then I was sort of starting to encourage him to maybe try and use the front two corners a little bit more, but he played really well. So I didn't think Nick played his best, but yeah, credit to Sharaf. He deserved that win.
And then while this is happening, so you're coaching that one stringer match, but you're keeping tabs on everything else right now. One of the other scores as well. Or
I'm pretty locked in, but there's the setup of the Spectre Centre had the scoreboard up on the. I mean, you've been at the Spectre Centre. It's got those massive jumbo screens up on the sort of mezzanine level. So I'm sort of looking up there, checking the score. One of the big matches going on at the time was with Nathan against Abdurrahman Nassar. And he's a player I think really highly of him. I think he's amazing, like very smooth, skillful. Nick played him at the national semi-final last year and was 2-love down and eventually won in 5, but he hadn't lost a single match. I mean, he's a very, very good number 4. So is Nathan, to be fair, but he had beaten Nathan 3-love in the regular season about a month earlier. And I think that's the match that had actually finished when Nick came off. And for Nathan to go from losing 3-love to winning 3-love was huge. That to me set the tone for, okay, well, maybe we can do this, even though Nick's lost. We're in here with a shot. I think Dana was 2-love up at the time and closed out his match pretty soon after. So that put us 2-1 up. And then the second shift was 2-5 and 8, I think. And again, we felt like we could win all those matches, but there's very few easy matches against Trinity. I mean, they're really good at the top, but they've also got depth to match it. So every match we thought was going to be really close. And yeah.
How were your emotions when you clinched it? I know the guys went crazy, but I remember looking at the live stream. You seemed pretty calm. I know you gave Gilly a hug, but
yeah, throughout the match, I was pretty just focused on coaching the guys that I was with on the top court. I'm not a massively emotional guy. Like, I don't really have huge highs and lows. So I think we're closing in. We were 4-1 up, and Roger, he's basically been out injured all year since last year, actually, with this knee problem that we've not really been able to fully resolve. But he was able to play well enough, we felt, to give us a shot. And so I think Omar, who I was coaching on the top court, was 2-1 up. He had just lost the third game and he was going on at the start of the fourth game when Roger reached match ball. And up to this point, I'd been following the scores, but I hadn't really gone and watched any of the other matches. I was really just focused on my court. But when he reached match ball, I think he reached 10-8 match ball. So I ran over to the side court just because I wanted to see it if he closed it out. And I think Omar was maybe 2 or 3 points into the fourth game at this point. And then he lost those 2 match balls, Roger did. And then he had another one and then another one. And it's probably been about 4 or 5 minutes by this point. I've been watching him and not watching Omar. And I turned around and was like, I need to keep my focus on this match because there's no guarantee we win this one. He might lose this game and go to 5. And I need to make sure I know what's happening here. So I think I sort of shifted my attention back to Omar. And then Roger I think in the end he had 8 match balls. And he eventually lost the game 18-16 on the first opportunity that Cumberbatch had. But at almost exactly the same time, Omar reached match ball. So he was 10-8 up in the fourth. And then he went 11-10 down, I think. And then eventually won it. And then poor Varun was over on the other glass court, kind of just doing his own thing.
Just taking care of business.
Had left. Yeah. I think everyone had left his court and was either watching Roger or watching Omar. And Varun was only about 30 seconds behind being the one that clinched it himself.
So, wow. Yeah. So many different scenarios I could have gone to.
Yeah. And in terms of emotions, it was just a relief. Like, it felt really, really satisfying, obviously, to finally achieve something that we've been so close to a couple of times before. But yeah, I think I've said this to you in the past, like, to me, coaching is really all about just helping the players achieve what really is their achievement. It's like, hopefully I'm a small part of it, but ultimately they're the ones that have to go on court and perform and deal with the pressure. And they also are the ones that deserve all the credit when they do that. So I was just really pleased that all their hard work had paid off. So
I think, it's fantastic. I remember when I first started this podcast and I did that first episode with you, we were talking about those guys that you were mentioning right now who were freshmen at the time and now they're seniors, and to be able to clinch it like that. And then I know I was very aware of how people were talking about you as the behind the scene secret ingredient for success for the Penn program. And to see it actually be fulfilled now as a national championship, it's great. It's awesome. Full circle. It's incredible. But I guess I also wanted to hear your take on the new format for how college squash nationals was to change up this year. And I want to hear your thoughts if you agreed with it or if you didn't like it that much. But yeah, what was your opinion on that?
I thought it worked really well. I really liked having the men's and the women's team championships together, same venue, same weekend. It was a little bit challenging from a selfish perspective to go from like the high of the men's semi-final match to then coaching the women straight after, same on like immediately after the final, all the guys. So the final started at 10:30 in the morning. So it was relatively early. The guys obviously win. They have their trophy presentation, and then Gilly and virtually all the guys in the team went and had some, we'll call it lunch, but it might not have been, it might have been a liquid lunch. Meanwhile,
very hydrating lunch.
I had to stay behind and coach the women who were playing a 5-6 playoff match against Stanford. And I love the women's team. Like, I love coaching them, but I'd be lying if I said that's what I wanted to do after the men's final.
I'm sure you're very hungry for to partake in the lunch. So, I'm also curious about what you think of the individuals format right after. And this has been a reoccurring conversation I've had with you in the past, but I know that you haven't really agreed with it being immediately the week after the pinnacle event of college squash. And I did hear on the squash radio that there might be some switch ups to having it during January. I don't know if that's fully confirmed yet, but
it's not confirmed as far as I know, but there's certainly discussions about when the best time in the calendar. I think a lot of people seem to agree with the take that we should finish the season with the pinnacle event. And I think for most people in college squash, that is the team event. Like, most people gear up for that throughout the season, and that is the event that they're targeting. I'm sure there are a handful of players, like, it's possible that someone like Veer Chitrani was more motivated for the individuals than he was for the teams. I don't know if that's true, but given the level he is and the opportunity he had to win an individual title, that wouldn't surprise me. But I think 95%, 99% of college squash players care more about the team event than the individuals. So to me, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to finish with an event that it's kind of like, imagine having the Super Bowl and then a week later you have another game. Like, yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So to me, it makes perfect sense to finish with the teams. So then you have the conundrum of like, okay, well, when do we have the individuals? Because obviously you want to keep that going. And the idea has been thrown around and discussed about maybe having it alongside the tournament champions, maybe having the first couple of rounds over a weekend in New York at somewhere like Open Squash or Nickel Squash or any of the other facilities in New York, and then shifting to the glass court for the semis and finals of individuals. I personally love that idea. I think it'd be an amazing showcase for college squash. It would expose college squash to a brand new squash audience with squash TV coverage, I'm sure. I almost can't think of a single way that would promote college squash better than that. So yeah, I'm completely in favor. Even if that logistically doesn't prove to be a viable option or feasible for whatever reason, I still think we should look to move the individuals to other times in the season. I mean, one suggestion that's been put out there is maybe having it at the end of the first semester, so that the first semester always feels a little bit flat. Like there's no real focal point to that part of the season. Like some teams play some big matches, but a lot of teams don't. So I think potentially having it like a week or two after Thanksgiving, early December, before a lot of the kids go into exam periods, could work well. I think tournament champions would be my preferred option for a number of reasons, but
yeah, it just seems like such a tricky thing to figure out. I mean, especially with also how important seeding is for that tournament, how seeding would work out if it goes before. But I'm curious to hear what you thought of this year's individuals. I know it was kind of obvious on paper that Veer should take it home, but you never know with college squash with the upsets that happen, especially in that tournament, which I guess is the funny part about how individuals are scheduled right now, is that you never know the player's motivation going to that tournament. But yeah, were there any standout players as a whole in the season outside, even on the Penn team with off the Penn team, that you want to give some recognition to?
I mean, what I thought was slightly unusual about individuals this year was that certainly on the men's side, we'll talk about the women in a second, but the men's draw basically went perfectly to seeding, which, how many times has that happened in the last few years? It feels like the individuals has upsets every single year, whereas the number 1 seed beat the number 2 seed in the final. The 2 semi-finalists were the 3 and 4 seeds. I think even the 5, 6, 7 and 8 seeds lost in the quarters. So you almost had a perfect bracket according to seedings.
Yeah, it's a bummer that no one like James Flynn is out there to knock out number 1 seeds anymore.
Yeah. So yeah, I was happy to see Veer win it. I think he's a class player. I thought he was playing exceptional squash. I thought his match with Nick, he produced some great squash. Nick was the one player in our team who was really up for individuals. I think Salman and Omar both wanted to win their first round and at least guarantee a first team All-American selection, but I wouldn't say they were that up for the event as they had been for the team event the week before. But Nick, maybe because he had lost in the final of the teams, he was definitely up for it. He felt like if he played well, he had a shot. And I agree, he did, but Veer was just really, really good that day. His short game is as good as anyone I can think of, really. It reminds me a little bit of Yusuf Ibrahim.
He's class act. Yeah. I mean, unbelievable his journey, how good he's become, especially in these past 2-3 years. I had a quick question on the side. Is Nick Spizzirri going professional? Do you have an inside take on this?
He's undecided, but he's definitely considering it. I don't know if you noticed, but he got the wild card for the Tournament Champions. So he played Auguste Dessord and lost in 4 there.
That was impressive result. I didn't expect that to go to 4, but
he's definitely open to it. I think he's got one more year. He should have been a senior this year, but he's using his extra year of eligibility to do a 5th year at Penn. I think he loves college squash. Sort of reminds me of Andrew Douglas a couple of years ago, like just loves college squash and wants to play as much college squash as he possibly can. But he's definitely looking at options to play professionally. I don't know if you're aware, but his brother is one of the top tennis players in the country in tennis. And
have you been pushing him to pursue it?
Yeah. I mean, Nick's very realistic. He's someone that's said quite openly, like he'll only do it if he feels like he can do himself justice. He doesn't want to just go on the tour and sort of float around in the sort of 50 to 100 range in the rankings when he feels like he could be achieving more. So for him, he's very on or off with squash. He's either fully committed and training his ass off and not going out partying that much and taking it very seriously, or he's not doing any of those things and he is doing the partying.
Yeah.
And I like that about him because he's not delusional. He knows exactly. He's very realistic about where his game is at, what he can achieve. He's got a lot of confidence, but I think he knows deep down that it's not going to be easy. Like, it's going to take a lot of work. And he's basically trying to figure out whether he's willing to put that commitment into it. I do think if he does commit, he'll commit 100%.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, one of the things he's looking at is potentially sort of hooking up with his brother, maybe both of them training in the same place. His brother obviously finding some sort of tennis academy, or we went down to Florida in January for a training trip, and I think that sort of something went off in his head of like, oh, maybe I could train here. My brother could. There's so much good tennis in Florida. Weather's really good, so that's something that he's considering. But yeah, he's not made a decision, but he's definitely open to it.
I mean, it'd be cool for a U.S. interest growing, especially with the Olympics now inclusion of it. And if that changes anyone's mind.
Yeah, I think that's also a factor that's playing on his decision, is the potential to possibly. I mean, I joked with him, he's got more shot at being an Olympian than his brother now.
That's good. Stuart, there's one broad question I had for you was that there's an interesting stat reading up when the men's team clinched the Potter Cup, and there have only been 4 or 5 programs who have actually won that. And it made me realize how rigid it is to win the Potter Cup and how it's usually won by a couple teams, and especially what Gilly's been able to do. I mean, a lot of credit to him and also you, but I'm curious to hear how, from what you've seen, what does it take to actually flip a program around from being not in a contending spot to actually flipping a program around to a contending spot like you guys have?
Yeah, it's a tricky question to answer. I think because there are only a handful of schools. I mean, I think Gilly has done a phenomenal job, sort of energizing the program and attracting players like Andrew and Ali a couple of years ago even further back when they were recruited, but convincing players of that caliber to take a chance on Penn, essentially, when we hadn't really done anything to justify that confidence that they showed in Gilly in the program was huge. Because the truth is, like as amazing as Gilly is, and hopefully I'm a part of that, like, we could go to probably 30 other schools and probably not have the opportunity to win national championships. So there is a really small pool of schools that are in the mix for achieving something like this. But yeah, it is pretty crazy that I think it's 6 teams in history. There was 5, we're now the 6th that have ever won the Potter Cup. And one of those, I think Navy won it way back.
I was completely shocked by Naval Academy being in that mix, but wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So really in recent memory, there's only really been 5. If you look at it from obviously Harvard, Trinity's long run is pretty legendary. Princeton and Yale have both won it in the last sort of, I think Princeton won it 2012 and Yale won it 2016. So they're relatively recent winners. And then obviously now us, but yeah, it's not easy. It takes a lot of, support, I would say, from the athletic department at this school. I feel like that is somewhere that we're very fortunate that we have great support from our alums, from our board. I was just on a call before I recorded this with the Penn Squash. So it was basically an alumni town hall with some board members and just reflecting. But I feel like we're really fortunate that we have all that support behind us.
I thought that stat was just mind blowing to me. I mean, if I had really thought about it, I'm sure it would have made sense, but just reading it on paper, it was a bit of a shock. But Stuart, thanks for doing the college talk with me. It's really cool to catch up on the season recap here, but there are a couple other things I wanted to talk to you about outside of college squash. One being the NSL, which overlapped with the college squash weekend, which I didn't think was prime to have that event overlap with what most American squash enthusiasts are tuning into. But I had the pleasure of commentating and doing the draft analysis on that event. Hopefully I didn't butcher it too much. There was some moments where I had no idea what I was doing, but I'm glad they took a chance on me. But I want to hear your thoughts on this completely revolutionary idea that Timmy and Spencer have thought of. And I know on Squash Radio, Stuart referred to this as hockey, where everything was just thrown at once. But I wanted you to elaborate on what you thought, if you were able to tune in after the Nationals on any of it.
Well, we actually had a team dinner on the Saturday night we'd obviously beaten Princeton that morning, and then someone, again, one of our alums had set up a really nice dinner for us, at a place called the Fittler Club in Philadelphia. So we were over there, and then, I ended up watching the draft with a few of the guys after that. Because we obviously had, Andrew was out there, shout out to Dylan Wong, who didn't get drafted. Yeah, but no, just broadly speaking, I think it's amazing. I think there has been a need for a professional squash league in the US for years. I grew up in the UK, where league squash is like a cornerstone of the squash scene in the UK. Like virtually every club has 2, 3, sometimes 5 or 6 league teams. And yeah, that's obviously not really existed. But it's been pretty obvious. I think a few people have tried to get it off the ground, but I think Timmy and Spencer deserve a lot of credit for actually pulling this off. And I know they've had good support. I listened to the episode they recorded with you where they talked about some of the people that were influential and putting some money into it. But I think it's great. I think it can only help grow the sport in the US to have a professional squash league. Now, the format, I have mixed opinions on that. I think it could, like, I'm totally in favor of trialing new formats. I can't quite tell if they've maybe gone too far, but I'm also open to being wrong about that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you obviously experienced it firsthand, so I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on whether it worked well or whether anything would change.
I mean, my one thing, I don't know if I should say it, but I mean, I should, it doesn't matter. My one thing was, as I was commentating, it just seemed, how were the audience supposed to know what was happening when I was a bit confused on what was happening when I got the actual live version of it? And if this was getting streamed on a live stream, if people were going to understand exactly what was going on. And my second thing was that there needs to be a way that the players know immediately what's going on. Because if the players don't seem to know if it's a power play or not, if the players don't seem to know if it's substitution, which it's a constant theme in squash where the players don't know what's happening with the refs call and stuff when they need to stop. So in that part, it makes it look really messy. But I think if they clean it up in that format, and well, the one really good thing about this format is that Timmy and Spencer seem very open to change, and it seems like a trial and error process of we're very, we would love to like make this work. So I think having their mindset on it is fantastic. Those are my 2 cents on it. Hopefully I didn't ruin my chance of coming back commentating for it.
I thought the draft worked really well. I like the idea of 6, or I would imagine they're going to try and expand so that there's more clubs or teams can get involved, but also more players can benefit from it. And the other thing I would say, in Connor, when I did the Squash Radio podcast, talked on the sort of financial side. The US to me is the one place in the world that can really elevate the money that's available to professional squash players. I just don't know if all the sort of gimmicks are necessary. Like I don't see what is wrong with like league squash in the UK like this. The National Squash League has worked relatively well. It's maybe not as successful recently, but yeah, I don't think that it would be a terrible thing to just have regular squash matches taking place. But I'm also open to trialing new ideas. I just think they've maybe tried too much at once, as opposed to maybe try the substitutions but without the other stuff, or maybe try the scoring format. Like the timed periods I actually really like. I think that's a good idea. And then the way you get a point, like doesn't matter if you win by 1 point or 20 points in that period, you essentially just get 1 point for winning that period. Like all of that I think is fine. I think the next big challenge is to attract some really, really top players, like trying to get someone like a Diego or a Farad or an Asal involved. I think that's the next way to elevate it. And again, the only country in the world that I can think of that can potentially invest the money required to get those guys to play in something like this is the US. So.
Yeah. One thing was, I know I was screaming in the draft analysis about Rory Stewart not getting picked, but if you have tuned in, was there any shockers on the draft pick that you were a little taken aback by or impressed by a certain team or on the draft side of things?
No, I mean, I know from speaking to Andrew about it, he said a lot of the investors cared equally as much about whether you were going to be good fun to hang out with in the bar after the match as how productive you were going to be on the court. And Andrew was basically suggesting that the reason Dylan didn't get drafted was because of his off-court reputation and the fact that he wouldn't be willing to go out partying till 2 or 3 a.m. But so when you're aware of that, some of the draft decisions probably make more sense.
There you have it, the best party animals in the squash scene, if you look at the draft.
Which is another reason why I can't understand why Diego didn't make the cut, because he would offer the best of both worlds on that front.
He would have been fantastic to have on, especially on the other side of things. I mean, given squash, we already know, but I see. Maybe, I mean, hopefully, I know Gilly was saying a team in Philadelphia is much needed. I'm surprised that they found, given that Spencer and Timmy are currently living in Philadelphia, haven't formed a team over there. So maybe perhaps you or Gilly could start up a team outside of college squash duties.
Yeah, although I also love the fact that it's like most of the teams, I know there's a New York team, but most of the teams are from non-squash hotbeds. Like I love that they're taking it to, I think, Louisville, Atlanta, Chicago obviously has got the Windy City Open, but it's not historically like a massive center of squash in the US. But yeah, I think that's great that those squash communities are being exposed to something like this.
And then finally, I just want to talk quickly recapping PSA right now. I know one thing I wanted to get your thoughts on, there's this new reffing initiative that's been happening. I don't know if you've caught on, where the players are actually not allowed to say anything. They're actually muzzled up on any type of talk back to the refereeing, and it's an immediate warning conduct stroke situation, which I know, Stuart, you're also a fan of the Twitter, but I know other players have complained through the Twitter platform. But I want to get your take on this type of new initiative, and there have been new initiatives being trialed by PSA to make sure squash is more free flowing. But yeah, I wanted to get your opinion on it.
I understand why they're going in this direction. I can see where it's coming from. I don't think it necessarily looks great on squash TV, and especially with sort of more eyeballs from sort of Olympic committee representatives on the sport. I think it is important that we tidy it up. I go back to sort of what I said about the match with the Princeton, against Princeton, and I think a lot of that dialogue would be controlled if the quality of the refereeing was just a little bit higher. But overall, yeah, I think the refereeing is clearly going in the right direction. PSA and this WSO initiative, like they've invested heavily in refereeing. They're putting a lot of time into it. They've also hired, I think, Roy Giangel and Andrea Santamaria as the first ever like professional full-time refs. That's a really positive step for me. I don't know Andrea that well, but I know Roy pretty well, and he is absolutely the person that I would have given that job to, because to me, for the last 20 years, he's probably been the best referee in world squash. I think the way he handles matches, I mean, first of all, he gets most decisions fairly accurate, but the way he handles the players is very good to me. Like, but
yeah, I think it's brilliant.
That's where I see. Yeah, but that's also where I don't understand why you need to put this thing in place where they're not allowed to speak, because someone like Roy, he handles being questioned quite well. He's respectful of the players. I think he gives them explanations, but he also doesn't engage for too long. He's pretty concise with his descriptions of why a certain decision's been given. And if you treat the players like that with a bit of respect, but also allow them the opportunity to ask questions about what was the purpose of it, or what were you thinking with this decision, like, the respect goes both ways. And I feel like I think in the past there's been not enough respect from the players towards the referees. I worry that we're now going too far in the other direction, where the referees, by virtue of not allowing the players to even speak to them or question them, are not showing the players enough respect.
That's a good point. Yeah. I'm glad you pointed that out. Yeah. But yeah, that was up on the reffing end I want to talk to you about. And then the last thing I wanted to ask you about was there any standout players from this season that you've taken notice that have shocked you in the progress or in the rankings, other than, I guess, Farag, because what he's doing is
Farag's obviously been exceptional. Paul Cole's back close to where he was a couple of years ago. I think he's obviously been the only guy that's really been able to challenge Farag. I think Diego's actually having a really good year. Like, I mean, I don't know if you saw the tournament he won recently, where he basically carved his way through everyone. Even in the final against Maspeth Hisham, I think he lost like 4 or 5 points in the first 2 games.
Yeah, and he was rolling in the third as well. I don't know what he seems to know how to play everyone except Farag. It seems like he's figured everyone out. I just don't know I don't know if it's a fitness thing or always seems to be the narrative around fitness, but I don't know if that's becoming irrelevant at this point, but I want to get your take on it.
See, I wonder if it's that or if it's the reverse, which is that Farag has figured him out. And I don't know if it's a tactical thing that Farag has identified that no one else has maybe managed to discover or exploit, or it's just that Farag has the ability to do things against Diego that other players can't. I'm thinking specifically like the way he's able to volley and cut the ball off and work him in. Like, he makes those first games so relentless. Like, was it Tournament of Champions, I think, where he basically just broke him in the first game, and then Diego won the first, but then lost the next 2 pretty comfortably. Somehow managed to recover and take the fourth. But I don't see anyone else doing that. Even when Diego plays Paul Hall, Paul doesn't seem to be able to take him to that point of sort of extreme fatigue the same way that Ali does.
Yeah, not even Assault. Not even Assault seems to know. So.
Yeah. Mazen's another player who's having a really good year. I mean, everyone's talked about his consistency and like makes too many errors to be competitive, but I think he's definitely made progress there.
Did you see this coming from Hisham? Do you always think if he was healthy, he'd be managing to get these type of results, or is this a bit of a shock to you?
No, I wouldn't say this is a shock. I think he's kind of where I thought he could get to if he makes the next jump, which is, to me, cracking that top 4, like getting in there with Asal, Ali, Diego, and Paul. That would be a jump that I probably don't see coming, but he's so close now that it wouldn't be a surprise, really. It would have been a year or 2 ago, but with the progress he's made already, I think he's capable. But I do think that that's another level up from where he's at now.
Yeah, I've been very impressed by him. I was going to say that it makes me sad to see his rise and not Faris Dazuki do the same thing. I think that he's a player that has a similar, probably more of a potential to move up in terms of the capabilities he has, but seeing them being in a similar age bracket and not seeing him move up the way Hisham has been a bit sad to see on the fans' end.
Yeah, and the other guy that was in that group around the same age and came through roughly the same time is Abogar, who's been really badly affected by injuries and doesn't seem to have got back yet.
Yeah, injuries. It's a tough one. How about anyone on the Challenger Tour that you're keeping an eye on? I know you do follow them that along, especially also the juniors being involved in the Challenger Tours as well. But
yeah, there's a few guys. Well, I thought the run recently by Bernat Jami, that was a little bit surprising.
Who didn't get drafted, who was very upset about it.
Yeah. And I saw that I think Yusuf Ibrahim was the number 1 pick in the draft, right?
Yeah.
And he went and beat him. So I'm not sure if he's particularly happy about that. The other guy that had a really good tournament recently, again, not Challenger Tour, but Farkas Balash, had a great run, made the semi-finals in Canada last week. Yeah, there's a few guys further down. I think Finlay Withington, who obviously made the final of World Juniors, I think. Yeah, he did. Like a year and a half ago, and maybe didn't come through quite as quickly as some people would have thought, but he's starting to do really well and get some good results. Zakaria, who you mentioned earlier, had a really, really good run, maybe the end of last year, but he's lost a few matches recently. Just looking down the rankings, Sanjay Jiva has actually done pretty well recently. So yeah, there's a few people that I think are sort of trending up the way and looking to crack maybe top 50, top 60.
It's good to give some shine to these players as they will be moving up the rankings and maybe also be partaking in this new NSL league that we mentioned earlier. Stuart, I think I'm going to wrap it up there. But again, thank you for joining in. Congratulations as a national champion coach now. And I'm sure your stock value has risen immensely over the past couple of weeks. And I know that you are becoming a bit of a celebrity around all forms of social media as I've been seeing your presence. I don't know if you're aware of it, but on different mediums right now.
I'm definitely not aware of that.
I just recently saw you on the Instagram video that College Squash put out. And then also on the Penn program, your voiceover on the Team Huddle was fantastic to hear.
But thanks, Sean. It's always fun to record these episodes. So, hopefully we can reconvene next year with another championship or national championship in the bag.